I don't know what the music's for.
That was John Cena's music.
I don't think I've ever heard John Cena's music, so I don't know if I knew that.
You can't see me. What time is it?
No, but yes, maybe now.
What time is up?
I'm learning.
You can't see me.
I just know he does this.
Yeah.
I don't know his music.
Because you can't see him. That's the whole thing. It's like
Uh-huh.
a trick.
He's doing a magic.
He's a ghost.
He's invisible.
Ooh. He's a
I don't
ghost.
see that. Look at him not be there. Hi, I'm Kat.
And I'm Gabe.
And we're the Ghouls Next Door.
Talk about that spooky stuff.
I was flat there. It's okay.
So,
We're
no
just
one will
gonna
know.
let
It's
it
going to be
be.
fine. Yeah. Welcome to the Ghouls Next Door.
Yeah. We
It's
talk about
another-
spooky stuff sometimes.
Yes.
Sometimes we talk spooky life.
Yeah.
Spooky real.
Spooky real.
Spooky all the time.
Yeah, we are doing a kind of impromptu series. It became a series.
And I don't know when we're going to be done it. You know, we're just going to keep doing it until there's no...
We feel like we've done it.
We're doing.
We'll just keep. Yeah, I think we got fire under us, and we want to highlight some issues. So we're going to do that.
You want to say things.
Yeah, and we wanted to explore film and how it can reflect the fears and worries of a community, right? In a way, like, especially now that everyone's kind of open to that, right? Like, everyone's open to learning and to...
I don't know about everybody, but a lot more people.
Yes.
In an ideal scenario.
Yeah.
Slightly more.
Yes.
Than before.
Yeah. I think it's like there's people who want to really see it. Like, there was a time, and that's something we'll discuss, like, next week, where, just a few months ago, where people were like, it's not time, or we don't need to talk about that. And
when
now,
is the time?
Yeah.
It's
and
now.
now it's now, right? And so I think people are more susceptible to hearing how their media can be, educational and also, impactful. And so, that's what we're doing. So we're doing this series that kind of, I guess we called it A Horror While Black, based off of an article we read for the Lovecraft Country episode. And I was like, yeah, no, that's good.
It pretty much hits. It says exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Kind of universally. It's just like, these are the things that everyone's been trying to say for a minute. And then everyone's like, no. Not that way.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's not that bad. And now not everyone, but a lot more people are like,
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You weren't exaggerating.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about it. I feel like that's the energy. Or people are like, nah, it's cool. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Or
being loud about it.
Yeah. It depends.
Being like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big part of it. Yeah. I think there's like this understanding that we haven't really been taking things seriously, and that there isn't any like right way to do it, or acknowledging that people were trying to do it in these other ways, like thinking of like Kaepernick, right? About him kneeling and people taking that their own way and being like, not like this, blah, blah. And now that we're like out there protesting and there's riots and loots and all kinds of stuff like that, and they're like, not like this. And it's like, well,
what is the right way? Please tell us.
It does, it doesn't matter.
Also, who are you, the decider?
Yeah.
Are you the decider of the correct way to do things? You're not. You're just a person.
Yeah. You also don't get to decide how, like, people who've been, in so much pain get to change it.
Like, no,
you don't
who are
decide
you?
That. Yeah.
You're a regular human.
Yeah.
We're all humans.
Yeah.
You don't get to pick what the right thing is.
Yes.
Morality is, what's the word? In anthropology, they say it's no. It's not objective. It's subjective. It depends on where you are, where you're from,
Yeah.
All that stuff.
What
So
you
you are
need,
not
yeah.
the sole decider of what everyone should be doing with their life, how they're doing it.
Yeah.
Everyone just needs to listen more.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think, we're trying to do here. And so on today's episode, we're going to be talking about a classic, a film that is as old as I am.
Ah.
I think it's 91, right?
Yeah.
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 It's as old as me.
I was 2. Or no, you were...
No.
Reverse. I wasn't alive yet, but I would be alive in 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
There it is. You were
Math.
-2.
-2.
You're -2. You know how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's much older, and so it is a product of its time. It wasn't intended, like, directly to be what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the way that, like, Night of the Living Dead, by casting a black man as the lead, George A. Romero didn't, like, he just picked the best actor. And
Mm-hmm.
how would he predict that Dr. MLK would be assassinated when it was airing, like when it was premiering?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way that he could have predicted such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes this, like, staple in the community. And so it does need to be, like, acknowledged. And I think what's great about what we're going to talk about, which is Candyman, is that there is going to be a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And it should have already been out by now, but coronavirus.
Yeah.
So it'll be coming out in September. Directed by Nia DaCosta and produced for Monkey Paw Productions, Jordan Peele.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very excited to see how the film is, because it's not a remake. It's an
Mm-hmm.
extension, right? It's a sequel in a way,
Yeah.
and, like, done deliberately.
Ah.
And, like, that's where, like, I'm very
Yeah.
excited to see how you take this tale and it's being used by people who should be using it, right? It's
Mhm.
their tale to tell.
Nothing about us without us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just, like, how they, take it back, because it wasn't ever intended to be this when it was first written as a short story, and it and would knowingly became something quite important.
Mm-hmm.
And so Candyman. Do you want to read what it's about?
Sure. We're talking about Candyman. Is it this top
Yes.
time? Okay. The Candyman. A murderous soul with a hook for a hand is accidentally summoned to reality by a skeptic grad student researching a monster myth. That is such a weird description of what it... But okay. Director, Bernard Rose. Writer, Clive Barker. It's based on The Forbidden.
Yes, which is a short story in the Blood and Bones. I want to say that's what the anthology is called, which is apparently going to get adapted.
Nice.
So that's going to be interesting. The original Clive Barker short story was set in the UK and did not feature a black man as Candyman. It was a white man, and it was more about classism and kind of like this disparity between these two classes. So it was more of that. It was and also about like what like rumor and stereotype kind of like becomes, because that's what urban legends are, right? They're just what we pass along, and it gets distorted, and it all starts from like a small, like the story of like the Candyman is like that myth that everyone hears about, the razors and the candy, which actually there's a great documentary about urban legends where they discuss about like how there was actually a Candyman, which was like this man who put arsenic in one of those like those like sugar
pixie
tubes.
sticks.
Yeah, but like the big ones. He put some arsenic or something like that in there, and it ended up killing his son and his son's friend. And it was like because he wanted to get rid of his son, and like he.
I remember us talking about this.
Yeah.
Never mind. I was just like, oh,
Yeah,
that's
but he
really awful. Continue.
no worries. It was just those two kids, but it's kind of like like the aspirin. That was like not so much a urban legend as that really did happen. These things happen, but they get like blown out of proportion, right? And so when we have people like
because everyone's gossiping about it, they're posting. Well, now we have the social media chain where it's like, did you fact check that?
This?
No, no, not at all. But I'm going to share it, and you go to it and you notice it's not. It's fine, but we're just sharing. We're sharing information.
Or we just share headlines, and we don't read the actual articles.
Yeah, so that you don't know what's actually being said.
Or you click the little eye
Mhm.
the little eye. You click that, and then it says, "This is the Onion," and it's satirical.
Yeah.
You could just
The
do
little
that
eye is very helpful in that it tells you.
if this is a reliable source or how long it's been there.
Yeah.
Too, because it'll say this thing has existed since 2012. If something says this just popped up, it has one post and it's been here since 2 minutes ago, I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Not
It's just,
reliable.
it's honestly challenging the populace
Yes.
who maybe are not well trained in media analysis and questioning
Media literacy, yeah.
media literacy and stuff like that. Just, yeah, you just gotta keep an eye out because urban legends are basically very similar. It's word of mouth. You're just telling people. People don't keep track of it.
Yeah.
They're not really asking hard and fast questions. You know,
Yeah.
they're just like, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Tell your friends.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then it's fear mongering as
Whisper
well.
down the lane.
Mhm.
It comes
Yeah,
out different.
telephone.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wanted to start this episode with a quote from the Clive Barker short story, The Forbidden, because I think it's such an interesting quote to start it out with, that I can see how Bernard Rose took that and was like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to put this in Chicago instead. Because
Yeah.
I think you can kind of it's shown in the film very deliberately. So
Mhm.
here it is. Like a flawless tragedy, the elegance of which structure is lost upon those suffering in it, the perfect geometry of the Spectre Street estate was only visible from the air. No doubt the estate and its two companion developments had once been an architect's dream. No doubt the city planners had wept with pleasure at a design which housed 3 and 36 persons per hectare.
Words.
And still boasted space for a children's playground. Doubtless fortunes and reputations had been built upon Spectre Street, and at its opening fine words had been spoken of its being a yardstick by which all future developments would be measured. Which is essentially we had this development that was intended to be the future. It was intended to be a future estate for families. It has a playground, and it makes sense structurally. But when you place it into this space, so when we take it to Chicago, right, into Cabrini Green. It's reflected in that these are the housing units, right, for lower income, and then right across the tracks, we have replica or similar fashioned buildings that were also designed in exactly the same way to be for lower income housing, being renovated and gentrified for the white people and the more wealthy people, literally just down the street.
Yeah.
And so even though this original story was that of classism, right? And this is something I feel we keep finding, and it's not by mistake that in other countries we see classism as the problem, and there is just direct, wealth distribution between different classes of people, and that's a pivotal problem. It gets replicated in a lot of Korean films. I've been watching The Kingdom. Very much in there. It's very much about that, right? But everywhere, right? Classism is everywhere. But here, classism almost exclusively, because of the narratives and in the way that our press works and the way that these rumors work in our country, it is related to race, right? So it's the reason why we, during Reagan have, the phrases of the welfare queen, when there's you think white women aren't the ones who are also there. I've only ever known white people who've had welfare, and so we have almost exclusively tied race to our classism. And so it makes sense for Bernard, if you're going to put it into Chicago, to transform this story from being that of here's this wealth disparity and that issue, instead being a race issue. And the problem with that is that who is he to make it a race issue? And so
because the person making it is a white person.
Yes. And so I think we miss a lot of marks. And that's not to say that this isn't a very historical and impactful film. And there are things about it that are revolutionary. And so in the documentary Horror Noir, there's a great commentary about Candyman. And there's this awe in that he was the first villain, monstrous supernatural villain that was a black man.
Yeah.
Right? Like before you have like Freddy and you have Jason and you have all that, but they didn't have a black man who did that.
Yeah.
And so to have one that's like kind of like you had compassion for him because you hear his story and you see that.
Because the story is sad.
Yes.
Like it's not like he is out here just for fun.
He's not Freddy when you're like, nah, you need to burn him again.
Or like he actually experienced awful things and like undeserving of those things to happen to him. So
and I think that's like, so for that, right, and to have a story that takes place in Cabrini Green and to feature a predominant, like there being like more black people on screen, albeit not portrayed very well or used very well, and used in a very traditional horror way.
They were used as fodder throughout, like every person of color, not every single one, but most of all of the victims were people of color. And I feel like that's intentional.
Yeah, except I think the psychiatrist.
Oh yeah,
yeah, but
right.
But pretty much,
pretty much,
it was black women who were being attacked, and so I think there's an issue. So like, you know, when we see this, right, it kind of shows like the glaring like issues with it, right? Like there was clearly something that's missing. And I think the biggest part of that is in the fact that like when you're watching this film and you hear about Candyman's backstory, in which he was an artist who painted wonderful things. His dad was a former slave, and then he learned art and science, and he was, you know, amazing. And he painted this white woman and they fell in love. Yeah. And then she got knocked up. And so then he was lynched. They cut off his art hand. They shoved a hook in there. They filled him. They put a honey on him and then had the bees attack him. And then they set him on fire because he just can't do enough. Right. Yeah. And you're told this like horrific story, and it's almost kind of like passive, like, there it is, you know, like, and you don't get a backstory really like that, like in the short story. But it was just there to kind of like explain away his pain and why it's so residual. Yeah. But I think like the issue there is that he is attacking Cabrini Green, right? He is attacking these people who look like him and who are suffering in the way, like, as a result, like, in the same, like, it's the same world, right?
Yeah, he's attacking the wrong people.
Yeah, when right across the way are the, like, in horror noir, it's explained, like, right across the way, right across the tracks, are the, like, you know, those people's ancestors are the ones who did that to him. Mm-hmm. Why isn't he over there? Why is he, like, pursuing this woman who does not belong there? Who's just, like, waltzing in, taking pictures
being
of
just
people's
very disrespectful.
Like, this is their life, and you're, like, acting like you're in, like, a cave of wonders.
Yeah. Like, no, it's very, like, I guess, voyeuristic? Is that the word?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It was gross. And, like, her whole thing is she's trying not to be that person while 100% being that person. Yeah. Like, I'm trying to be respectful, but I'm not, because I'm just going to take pictures and lie to this kid. And it's like, she was like, she was just being a Karen.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
This is what she was doing.
And I think it's because, like, to her, like, she has a very one-track mind because she doesn't have the knowledge to be educated on the intricacies of that community. And even her friend, who's a black woman, also was kind of distanced from that. Like, she's like, I don't even go over there, and I lock my doors. And because that place is so seeping with the rumor and with that lore, just like Candyman is, right? Yeah. That we are afraid of it the same way we're afraid of that man who's not real.
Well, yeah, if you think of it like how people in the suburbs are scared of the city, or there's certain neighborhoods in the city that people don't go to, and it's like, people live there. Like, what do you mean? That's life. People, their lives are there. Yeah. So, like, there's no place that's unlivable in the city. There's places where disproportionately, like, are put things upon them that shouldn't be, but, like, people act like it's this big boogeyman. The city or like areas of the city that are just ungoable.
Yeah, like North Philly, right? It's just like people won't go up there, and it's like people live there. That's a community of people. You have to live that every day. And you like, it's kind of like when, you know, the white savior thing where they go down to Africa and they take pictures with like you know, an African child and they're on their hip, and it's just like, who the
It's like
That's their
life-changing.
life. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it's so, like, I was, like, watching her and I was so mad. I was like, how
Yeah.
dare you?
There was a good TikTok that basically was like, where are all those mission trip chicks
Yeah, like,
who
where
propped
you
that
at?
kid up on their knee and was like, ah,
Yeah, like, where you at?
life-changing. Oh my God. And then it's like, yeah, what are you doing? Where are you right now
Yeah.
in this movement?
Well, that's the
Where
thing
are you
is,
at?
like, they're just tourists, right?
Yeah.
They can never really be in that environment. And I think, like, there's a line that's said in the beginning when they're kind of, like, discovering it and she figures out, like, a woman was murdered because the janitor
Mhm.
told her the story and they're like, "Oh, but I don't know nothing about that," right? And it was, like, this whole thing
Mhm.
where her friend says, like, this isn't, like, a joke. A woman died there,
Yeah.
right? And it made me think of, like, the true crime community where
Mhm.
people so often are, like, idolizing or, like unintentionally idolizing, but, like, the way that they've kind of fetishize these crimes and those who
Mhm.
committed them and, like, you know, eat up these, you know, podcasts. And I mean, I've been one of those people and I
Yeah.
always was like, why does this feel bad? Like, why is
Yeah.
this bad? And it's like, oh, because we don't remember the victims' names, right?
Yeah.
We only remember the killers and we
And it's like
hear-
exploiting their loss
Yes.
and like the pain that they experience. It's just kind of like making it like a fun entertainment piece
Yeah.
instead of something
It's
that
like
is horrible that happened to a human.
Ted Bundy's victims' families are still around. Jeffrey Dahmer's victims' families are still around. And the thing about Jeffrey Dahmer is that he specifically targeted black men
Mm.
because they tended to not have as much hair. They did not have as much hair, and he was into, like, them looking like a mannequin. It's very complicated. Again, I've done a lot of research, but it was like that part of it is so, like, swept under. No one even
Mhm.
thinks about that. Like, he was a terror to the black community.
Yeah.
Like, what he was doing to, like, BIPOC is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And we just see them as, like, not even names. They're just victim number one, and
Yeah.
you don't really put any real thought into them being a real person. And I think, like, that's what Candyman is all about. Like, that's what urban
it's
legend
definitely
is about.
the energy that was in there.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, oh, you don't matter. We're just gonna like go take pictures of this murder scene. Who cares about anyone who died? It's kind. I also think of it like how we treat America, and it's been built on the blood of Native Americans.
Yeah,
and like
all these indigenous people,
Yeah.
and then we, like, make the poltergeist, and we're like, they're angry, and all of Stephen King's work.
yeah.
I went on a rant about Stephen King earlier. I'll tell you about later.
Okay, I'm
You think he
excited
would
to hear.
learn, and then he didn't. Anyway,
Yeah.
I wanted to quote. So we had a few different articles that we were pulling from.
Mhm.
One is this one on The Ringer about this film, and so there's actually a quote from Rose, Bernard Rose, the director,
Mhm.
and why he put it on to Chicago. And
Yeah.
he said, "The fear of the urban housing project, it seemed to me, was actually totally irrational because you couldn't really be in that much danger. Yes, there was crime there, but people were actually afraid of driving past it. And for Rose, what makes dilapidated buildings like Cabrini Green so scary to people on the outside is, again, a sort of superstition, a prejudice. It's sort of a kind of fear that's at the heart of modern cities, and obviously it's racially motivated. But more than that, it's poverty motivated," which those go hand in hand.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of what our racial system does. And I think it's like, there was like one of these articles, I'm sorry, there's so many, where
yeah.
I was looking at it, and it essentially was like, the real villain of this movie is Helen.
Yeah.
Is this tourist who comes in and stirs up this trouble and, like, brings back to life this rumor. Like, she's like, it's literally just like, those people just living their life. They're just going by, doing their thing. They're suffering from crime, right? And in the way that they've always done, and it's been ignored, right? And then her tourist self comes in, starts taking pictures of their walls, like people aren't living there trying to get up the staircase with their groceries. Like, so aggravating.
Yeah.
Walking into the people's houses. Like, how are you going to go up into a house? Like, you're in an apartment that you do not own.
Yeah.
That was a crime scene. Like, what are you doing?
Like, you don't have any right to be there.
Yeah.
By any means. And also, she's just, like, invading upon everyone's, like, space. Like, it's just definitely really gross.
And not realizing why that's a problem.
Yes.
Was a big thing,
that's
too.
kind of, it's a white person.
Well, and I think, like,
people do.
there's, like, one line
bad.
where she does remark, where she says, like, a woman is murdered and there's all this crime and all that stuff that happens and nothing happened. Like they never get any help. But then the second that she got attacked and a white woman calls, they came running.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like I get why she was afraid. I get why she like did that. But that little boy was right. He was like, you said it was going to be fine.
Yeah.
And you lied. Like you put me in jeopardy. Like you can't be. What are you
Took
doing?
this kid to the police station for how many hours?
Yeah,
like,
where's his parents?
Like, you can't take a child that is not your child with you to anywhere.
Yeah.
Witnessing anything or not. Like, they're not legally allowed to do that.
Wild. So wild.
They would have had to go back later, find that kid's mom or parent or whoever, and ask if they could take him.
Yeah, and they'd be like, no.
Yeah.
I ain't helping this lady. What was she doing here?
Yeah.
And it's like, you have the very pathetic looking like criminals, like there's gangs outside and they were just like hanging out in there, like they were not
doing
like if this was supposed
scary.
to be something you're afraid of, like they were doing nothing. They were just like, you shouldn't be here.
Yeah, what are you doing here?
And they're like, no, I should be here. And it's like, no, you really shouldn't. What are you doing? And like thinking that they were,
and like
cops,
also you're just
too.
Like walking up in their space, you should be answering their questions. You don't live here, lady.
Yeah. Yes, there's so much of it where it's just like,
where it's like literally like this is their house. And you're walking into their house telling them they don't need to know why you're walking into their house.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's called America.
Yeah.
It's called America. That's what they do.
Yeah.
You walk into their house and say, it's mine now. It's the American way.
Yep. Manifest destiny.
Yep, that's how it works.
Finest.
Yeah, there's so much in this that could be dissected. Like we can go on and on and on, and this is like our mini-sode, so I don't want to go too much into it. But there was this article from the Rolling Stone that I thought was really important about it because it was, to me, it kind of reflects what we see these days in the argument of like black on black crime, right? This fiction of that, and like there's not white on white crime, or like why that is supposed to be a deterrent for us to not still care about any kind of crime on people. Yeah, like what? So
it's the whole all lives matter.
Yes,
thing.
Continue. So here's a quote in a block from the Rolling Stones article. Folklore by Black people and folklore about Black people have often been at odds. White hegemony has made it so that the morbid whispers of the latter category can multiply in force until commonly accepted, ultimately becoming powerful enough to permanently imprint on a nation's psyche. I am the writing on the wall, the whisper in the classroom, he says to Helen. Without these things, I am nothing. So now I must shed innocent blood. Come with me. Later, he drives the point home again. I am rumor. It is a blessed condition, believe me, to be whispered about at street corners, to live in other people's dreams, but not to have to be. And so that to me is like what Candyman to me was, is superstition. It is the stereotypes against Black people. He is just the embodiment of decades and decades of rhetoric against Black people, villainizing them and making them, in any way that they can, the villain of our society. Yeah. And so he is just the embodiment of that. And that's how he lives and thrives. And the reason why he was so powerful in this film is because Helen, as a white woman, even though she was trying to fight against it, did believe in those things. She doesn't believe in supernatural, right? She doesn't believe in urban legends.
She gave him strength through her racism.
Exactly. Thanks, Helen. And I think that's like it, right? Like, it's kind of like in Lovecraft Country where we had the white man, I forget his name, Henry, I think, Henry Winthrop, who had his like half Black family living in this white neighborhood and thought the villain was the supernatural thing and not realizing the villain was white people who are going to hate your mixed race family, right? That's what Helen is, right? She doesn't believe in this supernatural, but she does, just by way of existing in America, believe those stereotypes. Like, she just thought she was above them. Yeah. Like, she didn't, like, when they were like, there's gangs and stuff in this neighborhood, right? Yeah. She didn't say, no, like, these people are people and they're just hurting. Yeah. She said, just don't pay them any mind. Like, she was like, just, they can't hurt us. Yeah. Right?
Well, because she feels invincible.
Yeah. But it was like, she wasn't, like, really looking at the problem. She was just like, yeah, but I can do whatever I want. Yeah. And I think
it's fine. It's just...
Yeah.
It's totally good.
Shh, black woman who's my
Yeah.
friend who I haven't really listened to this entire time and then dies because of me, like for no good reason. Yeah, wonderful.
Well, yeah, I guess if you're talking back for horror noir, it's literally that like best friend
Mhm.
who asks if you're okay the entire time.
Yes, exactly. And that's what her role was, which is so tragic in a story. And then, there's, I think, one of the big issues in what is brought up in horror noir, and one of the obvious things that we see when we look at Candyman is this issue with mixed race couples.
Mhm.
And also like this like villainization. I feel like I'm making up that word.
I think it's a word. Yeah.
Monsterization of the black man as
Mhm.
being this predatory monster upon the virginal, pure white woman, which is
Mhm.
what we saw at the beginning of time for film with Birth of a Nation, right? Which was heralded as like, one of the most amazing films. It was shown in the White House under like, yeah. And it showed a white man in blackface who was Gus, who was pursuing this white woman, and he's clearly like the problem, and he ends up getting lynched by the Ku Klux Klan, who are heralded as like the heroes of this story. Like they are the hero, and this was like shown in the White House, and it was shown as like,
like this is what the truth is.
Yes, and that, and in horror noir they also talk about how, for some areas in the country, like this was their only glimpse of black people,
representation of black people that didn't include black people.
Yes, exactly. And in this way that showed them as being ignorant and being monstrous and preying upon their women. And when you live in a world where you have someone like Emmett Till who was murdered just for like smiling at a white woman, right, viciously murdered, like you can't have films like that and not see how there's a result. Like you cannot look at that and not be like, okay, media literacy is important and representation is important. And that's why it's like, that's one of the big problems I had with this film was like we had something like Birth of a Nation, and then later you have something like King Kong, right? We have these like narratives where there's this, representation of a black male pursuing a white woman and he's the villain. And you have that same thing again
and again
here. And that's not to say that like there isn't like, no, I mean like multiracial families are beautiful. That's what we have both of us, like both of us are doing that, right? And it is beautiful. But when what we really only see in media tends to be like when we think of interracial couples, they generally are on screen as a white and black like people, and it's usually like, oh, look who's coming to dinner.
Yeah, it's sort of like the main topic of the film most of the time, or it's like a heavy overlaid topic of the film. So like Get Out. I mean, that's why.
Yeah. I mean, this was a direct commentary on who's coming to dinner. Yeah. Right? Or the Blind show. The Netflix
Love is Blind.
Like, in the interviews later, she was like, yeah, race is an issue, but it wasn't like that big of an issue, but they amped it up to be our only
They made
thing.
it like it was like the biggest deal.
Yeah. And she was like,
and it is a big deal to a point.
Yes.
But it's not like the only piece of who people are.
Yeah. And it's like, and when it comes to like the one thing that I enjoyed about Midsummer was that we had an interracial couple that didn't feature a single white person in it, right? Like it was like, there's other races to be interracial dating for, right? But I think also the problem is like when you have, like this isn't even an interracial couple, right? In his story it was, they had loved each other, right? And in this, like, he's just preying upon this woman who shouldn't be there, who's, going through her own issues and struggling and eventually does die, and then becomes, like, this pathetic, like, who's going to yell Helen in the mirror besides her terrible ex-husband? Like, nobody. She'll never understand it. She'll never be the rumor that he was.
Yeah, it was weird. And I mean, honestly, as you said, it just kind of continues that like that the only way that can exist is if it's some sort of predatory thing, like that it's not. So you have like all those websites that are like are race traders.
Yeah.
And like coming after people who have like been taken. Like, that's how they frame it. Like, that you're a traitor to your race,
your
or
mind
that,
controls,
that, like, you could not willingly be in those situations because of whatever racism that they have or exist everywhere in the country.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
But yeah, so I feel like it's just like, it kind of just fuels that fire too, where it's just like, oh, it can't.
Yeah.
Monsters. It's monster time happening.
Yeah. And I think, like, with this film, right, there's so many opportunities to be a direct commentary on these issues and to do it in a way that's intentional, to say, like, look at what's wrong, right? But because it is from the lens of a white person who, nothing about us without us, right? Like, we don't have that, information. We don't have that point of view. And so there is a lot of problems with the film. And there was so much potential if you're going to, do that. And, what we've discussed on this show in this series is, like, when films do it right? And our next episode is going to be that, when it's done right. And there's this really, really good article that I read from the Chicago Tribune that literally came out right after the film had premiered. And there's, like, so much about it, but the Carl Franklin had a lot to say about the film, saying that it was irresponsible and racist.
Yeah.
And for a lot of reasons, like the fact that we had, like, a large boogeyman who was a black man, right? Like, he saw a problem with that because he saw it as being the fears of middle-class white people being brought to life. And that's, what it is, really, right? And he says, it unabashedly uses racial stereotypes and destructive myths to create shock. I found it hokey and unsettling. It didn't work for me because I don't share those fears and buy into those myths. And he says that he was, really offended by the fact that, he was pursuing a white woman. He said it smacked of King Kong and all of that, right? And the fact that it also was that he was exacting revenge or pain onto the very community that he should be protecting and that he is a representative of. And so it doesn't make any sense. But my favorite line from that article was actually, like, at the end, it was like, all I'm saying is that Spike Lee probably wouldn't like this film. I was like, yeah. Because when we watched it, I was like, there's no way. Like, there's so much that's wrong with this. And it's so apparent and painful, honestly, because of the ignorance of it. But I do understand, like, where there's parts of it that were exceptional, right? Like, the fact to have Tony Todd like that, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that he was, like, alluring, like, he wasn't like Freddy, who's, like, scarred and evil.
Oh,
like,
yeah, he was nice.
Yeah.
He was beautiful.
Yeah, and him just being like, be my victim. It's like, okay.
Yeah, he's got a great voice.
Right? And it's not until you see, like, the bees, like, all that is, like, so late.
Like, he's not necessarily scary throughout. Like, the reality of the people being murdered in his presence is scary. But, like, him himself, he was not.
Yeah, I think it's, like, the myth was so much scarier than him, and urban legend is so much scarier than him. And he was just, like, you can understand that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I feel like it all ties back to the fact that, like, lots of media in the 90s was made without much thought in terms of trying to say something that isn't offensive.
Yeah. And even up until, like...
Yeah. Or, like, late 2000s.
Even now, it's still...
Yeah. And I just feel like no one, or not a lot of people, were wearing their media analysis glasses and did not understand, like... Or maybe weren't at a place where they were ready to understand all of these things. And then just kind of made inexcusable actions during that time that resulted in the reality that we have now. But, like, I feel like people are now starting to realize how deeply media impacts us as a society, as capitalists, like capitalism, everything, like how ingrained it is since it's so everywhere with, like, technology improving and all of that, where we really start to see the bigger impact of, like, what it means when you say these things and how that impacts people in a very real and, like, like, I don't know, like, visceral way, where it's just, like, it affects everyone because we're all experiencing it and it's everywhere.
Yeah. I think, like, also a part of it of the 90s, like with with the exception of like Tales from the Hood, which is by a Black director, right? And
Mhm.
it's distinctly stories that are targeting things that Black people were suffering from, is that the 90s and what we grew up in was a very much a colorblind society that
Mhm.
felt themselves above racism, and that was done, like it was finished, right? And it's very much like Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. They're really
Mhm.
like, her book was to combat this ideology that racism was over, and
Yeah.
that because Jim Crow wasn't there and because we weren't writing like the actual racism into the laws like very bluntly, right?
Yeah.
The fact that we were going around them
That it was
a
gone.
problem, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I think like that's a big part of why there's so much ignorance, and when you look back, it does not age well. A lot of 90s things, like watching Law and Order, you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, disgusting, because people
Mhm.
like, we thought, like everyone just thought everything was okay if we were throwing punches at everyone, that meant it was equal and it was fair. But
Mhm.
you were still ignoring and not fighting against it because you were pretending it wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm super excited
About the
to
new
see
one.
Nia DaCosta's thing.
Yeah.
And like they posted a great short little piece from it, which has like the puppets that shows the different ways in which Black people were lynched or hurt in different ways throughout our history. And
Mhm.
it's a mix of like Candyman's lore, but it also has like the young man who was convicted or accused of killing two little white girls and was the
Mhm.
youngest person to be
On death row.
on death row and murdered that
Yeah.
way. The man who was like dragged behind a car for
Yeah.
miles until he died. Like all of those things are in there, and you can tell that like it is deliberate, and it's
Mhm.
taking this back, and it's like, okay, if you want to tell our story, because there's so much potential here, let's
Mhm.
do it. Let's do it the right way. And to have amazing like cast, like we have our Dr. Manhattan comes back, right?
Yeah,
So it's
he's
like,
great.
it's so amazing to see him on the screen, and I'm super excited for it. And we will do an episode when it does come out, because I'm sure we'll have so much to say.
Yeah. And there's actually a quote that you put in here that I think should be said, because it is still talking about the older one that is committing the things that it did
Yeah,
that
yeah.
were great. But it's from UCR. And Jennings and Einzer, award-winning graphic novelist and professor of media and cultural studies. So very cool stuff. I wish I was doing.
I'm here
From the University of California, Riverside, says that it's kind of timeless because it's one of the first horror movies that really deals with one of the most horrific things in America. And that's the chattel slavery, violence against Black people in America, Jim Crow laws, and anti-miscegenation.
miscegenation.
Yes, laws. He says that
Miscegenation. Sorry.
that's what Candyman represents. You have this beautiful white woman who says, you don't exist. And it enrages him because he's like, no, I do exist. And you're going to deal with me or else. Because it's like, that's kind of where we are now.
Yeah, right.
Where it's like, everyone's like, sweep it under. You don't exist. This doesn't exist. Racism isn't real. I don't see
your
color.
myth, like how small of this community to be afraid of this boogeyman.
Yeah.
And
it's
not
like,
realizing
racism
the
isn't
boogeyman is
real.
racism, right?
Yeah.
Like the boogeyman is real. Candyman
Where it's
is
like,
real.
slavery was so long ago. It's like, you know, people who do or say things like that.
Yes.
Where it's just, no, it is. You just haven't been paying attention. And also, society has very intentionally made you an idiot. So we're now at a point where we're like, everyone, look, you cannot escape it.
Mhm.
It is happening. It has been happening. Make everything inconvenient so that everyone sees.
Yeah.
That's the vibe I got from that quote. I wanted to express.
Yeah. No, that's why I pulled it, because it is exactly it. You're right. He is the embodiment of those fears, and he is real.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't say his name 5 times. I think we did this whole episode, and I'm sorry.
Oops.
But as we say here, don't get married.
Delete your kid.
Yeah, and stay tuned for the future of Candyman.
Yeah, it'll be better.
September, I believe.
It'll be a better time.
I'm excited.
It'll say all the things.
Thank you, Jordan.
Societal
thank you,
horror.
Nia.
Let's
Man,
go.
I'm so excited.
Societal horror. Let's go. We'll talk about it in our next episode too, because it's like a whole trend.
Yeah.
But like a good one that stays and goes forever.
I'm excited. Yeah. All right. Well, bye.
Bye.